Well, ever since 1996, Australia has had a national firearms agreement, and a lot of weapon types have been banned. Specifically, semi automatic rifles were taken off our streets in an enforced buyback. If you wanted to keep them, you had to prove that you needed them for your occupation and jump through a bunch of hoops to get a license to be allowed to keep such a weapon. We were told that it was to keep us safe, and we were told that it was just the semi automatic rifles. But that isn't quite how it's worked out. And Ozzie from Ozzie Reviews joins me now to talk about the fact that, well, it's not really over, is it, Ozzie? It just seems like they're constantly adding more and more rifles to this list of rifles that we're not allowed to have.
Correct, mate. But it's not only rifles. First of all, thank you for having me on the show. It's a real privilege to be here with you. But, mate, it's not just rifles. Since 1996, we've had magazine bans, okay, on certain capacities, depending on the configuration. That's both pistol and also rifles. We've had caliber restrictions and bans.
Well,
We've
in
had
West
cosmetic
Australia, we've
appearance
certainly seen that.
restrictions. Yep, exactly. We've even had lever action, shotgun bans. The list goes on, and unfortunately, it's it's just continual. Even if you do absolutely nothing, you don't say anything, do anything, the bans and the proposals just keep coming and keep coming.
Mm. Look, I'm not a firearms owner myself. I don't have a license. I don't own any guns. I did spend a couple of years in the Army Reserve. We played with guns quite a lot, including ones that are explicitly outlawed for civilians in Australia. You know what? No one
Mhm.
actually shot anyone else while I was there. No, none of the trainees, none of the recruits, and none of the privates ever decided to go on a
Yeah.
shooting spree. I'm not quite sure why. You can figure that one out for yourself. But one of the things that strikes me is the enormous amount of fear that is built around this topic of guns. And I remember I spent a year studying acting, and we had to do some pistol shooting as a part of that just to get used to guns because guns come up a lot in acting roles. And one
Mhm.
of the participants, a late 20s female, had a basically an emotional breakdown and couldn't stop crying in hysteria just from being near. She hadn't even fired a gun yet, just being near guns that were being fired downrange. What do you make of the amount of fear mongering that goes on about firearms in the media?
I think since 1996, they've done a good job. I have to admit, they've done a really good job at instilling fear into people. It got to the stage after 96. I mean, I was an adult, very young adult in 96, but, I was affected by that. And the general consensus, and it was like a dirty feeling. They painted all of us with the same brush.
Mm,
If you were a gun owner, you were a mass murderer in waiting. And that
yeah.
was what they had started pushing really hard back then. So a lot of people did. They handed in firearms and then they didn't ever get another firearm because they felt guilty, they felt dirty or whatever. And this is the push that they've continued on. And in combination now with catchphrases like military style
Mm,
weapon or their favorite one, rapid fire weapon,
mm-hmm.
and the problem is any firearm can be a rapid fire weapon. So if it just gets adapted to their push for removing firearms from licensed shooters, they can do that with anything. I mean, let's be honest. How many articles have we seen in the news there where it's simply a 22 and you see a little 22 case on the ground and it's been in some shooting at a 7-Eleven or something like that, and they're going,
Mm.
a high-powered weapon was discharged, and you're seeing a little 22 case. I mean, they can talk anything up and manipulate it to suit their agenda.
So I have a theory that if something is more frightening when used as a stick than it is when used as a rifle, then it should not be regulated as a rifle. It should be regulated as a stick. And
Mhm.
certainly, most of your air rifles, the fact that we regulate air rifles in this country, I think, is a national embarrassment. But then you get through to your
Mhm.
more high powered stuff, your more serious stuff. And look, let's be honest, a rifle can be used to kill. Hunters do it all the time. They're using it to kill animals. We do know that
Mhm.
from time to time people misuse rifles and misuse pistols in crimes. They use them for the commission of a crime. To what
Yeah.
degree, though, are we finding a link between lawful firearms ownership and that sort of criminal use of firearms?
And this is the problem that I find when you go to the Australian Bureau of Statistics. Like, there's no breakdown with their, for example, yearly homicides with a firearm as to who's licensed and who isn't. Now, I look at it this way: if they were licensed, we'd all know about it because they would be promoting that and pushing it in the
Yeah,
media. So,
yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there is the data, but I don't see it publicly put out there. So,
Mm,
in saying that, mate, I look at it this way. There's over 1 million of us here in Australia. So yet another day's gone by without a million of us killing anyone or doing
Mm,
anything wrong. So,
mm,
and people say, oh, but what about a couple of years ago when that licensed shooter did X, Y, Z? And it's like, okay, we're all human beings. So let's break down the statistics out of a million.
mm.
If every couple of years we have one or two licensed shooters who actually do something wrong, give me, and I'm open to suggestion here, give me an example of any other community group
Mm.
that we have in our society that has such a great track record.
Well, it is interesting because many things can be misused. Some of the most deadly mass attacks in history throughout the world have actually been done with trucks driving through crowds, and
Yeah.
I don't see anyone trying to ban high-powered trucks. They're a necessary tool. Let's talk about that for a
Mhm.
second, though. There are people out there who would say no one needs a gun. What are the practical
Mhm.
applications of a firearm?
Numerous. I mean, not only, I mean, I can talk from my own perspective. Obviously, I run a cattle property, so the use of a firearm is needed. Obviously, when I have to put down any sick or injured stock. But the big thing for me is pest control.
Mm,
Now, I've got a big problem with wild dogs. In southeast Queensland here, and I spent 8 years out running my own feral pest control business, controlling feral animals on other properties, and the most I've seen in wild dogs, this is personally, is 36 dogs in a pack. Now,
wow.
when you're getting dogs like that and they're taking down a fully grown beast every 3 days on a property, that is severe. That's
Mm,
substantial financial loss, not only to the business owner being the farmer, but the environmental impact on that as well, because dogs unfortunately do spread a lot of disease, wild dogs. So, if you're expecting to go up on a pack of dogs, especially in those sort of numbers. I mean, even let's take it a lot more smaller on average numbers, say like 8 to 10.
mm,
Okay, now that's what I normally get around here. So if you're going to walk up on a pack of dogs with a bolt action 5 shot rifle, you're mad.
mm,
Like that's my view on it.
mm,
So there is a definite need there for those fast follow-up shots, whether that be via a semi-automatic firearm or simply a lever action, a pump action, or any other sort of action that you feel comfortable with,
mm.
that you can provide those fast and humane follow-up shots. So, there's a reason there. But the biggest reason to me is we live in a free society. Well, that's how it's supposed to be. So if you, for example, you don't, as you said, you don't own any firearms. Well, what if you'd like to go out and take up target shooting, for example?
Yeah.
Okay, so even if it was pistol shooting, then, that's why in pistol shooting, semi-automatic is quite popular because why? You're running around, you're shooting at targets, you're trying to better your score, and
Mm,
you're just having a great time with everyone that's there. And
mm.
that's the reality of firearm ownership in this country. But unfortunately, we get the media that's promoting, the smallest fraction of licensed shooters ever doing anything wrong. And
Mm.
they also focus on the people who do the wrong thing constantly, and that's the criminals with firearms.
Before we come back to your comment earlier about the appearance laws and this so-called rapid fire business, we'll get to that in a second. I want to stick with the sports shooting side of things for a moment. There's a lot of people that are uncomfortable with the idea of people owning guns for fun. Talk to me a little bit about though the reality that the sports shooting. It's my understanding is one of those sports where men and women can compete on very much an equal footing when it comes to accuracy and precision, and in fact, there's
Yeah.
an enormous disabled community that enjoys shooting as well.
Yeah, massively. And you'll find too, mate. Like I remember years ago, I used to go out and I used to shoot in a rimfire pistol shoot,
Mm,
and it was run through the week at one of the local ranges near me at the time. And predominantly, it would be a lot of elderly people who were going there. And when I say elderly, like I'm talking, in their 70s.
yeah.
And it was funny. I always remember these two ladies, and I'd never really spoken to them, so I didn't know their names or anything, but every time we would go out there, the two of them would meet up, and this was every couple of weeks. So they'd meet up and they'd talk, oh, how's the grandkids, and doing this. And then it was their turn to shoot. And they'd shoot like 10 rounds of 22 through at the target and have a bit of a laugh. Then they'd go back and sit down and they were talking more and they were talking about, oh, my son's doing this and my daughter's doing this.
Mm,
But, to me, I looked at that and I thought, you know what? It's not the shooting, is it? That's
no.
not the main focus here. It's the actual social aspect. And
Mm,
these are two elderly people who are absolutely no threat to anyone, and
mm,
they're going out there with their semi-automatic, pistols, firing a few rounds down range and just having a great time. So I look
Mm,
at that and I think, who the hell wants to take that away from them? What would you
mm.
prefer them to be, just sitting in front of the television with their microwave meal with no visitors or friends? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's it's just ridiculous when I look at that, to think, why would you want to stop those decent law-abiding people from enjoying some freedom?
Mm. You mentioned a little while ago the lever action shotgun ban. That's a reference, I presume, to the Adler that was in the news a few years ago.
Mhm.
We're kind of seeing Adler 2.0 in the form of this wedge tail pump action 308 rifle. Now, John
Yeah.
Howard has been rolled out in the media recently, pushing to
Mhm.
restrict this gun. Is it not fair to say, though, that when John Howard proposed the National Firearms Agreement in the first place back in 1996, he allowed pump action rifles, did he not?
Correct. He okayed them. So, we've had and enjoyed the use of pump action rifles ever since. And where's the incident
Mm,
where licensed shooters are doing something wrong with it?
mm,
That's why I think it's just a complete witch hunt. And if I may just very quickly touch on that, for a lot of people who may be watching this and may not understand, Topher, is, we've had pump action rifles since the early 1900s. Like, the first
yeah,
ones are
right.
around about 1908 that came out. So in 308 caliber, which they're talking about with the wedge tail, from my knowledge, and look, I'm certainly not a historian, but my knowledge, it was about 1953, 1955 when Remington first brought
Mm,
one out in the 760, not the 7600, but the 760.
mm,
And that ran through till about 1981. And then we saw the Remington 7600s come out, which was just an improved model. And the wedge tail is no different. I mean, it's manually operated.
mm,
What more do you want? I mean, John Howard said back in 1996, as you touched on, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, it's the semi-automatics. There's no other way. Okay, well, that was handed over. So leave us alone with what we've got.
mm,
There's no new technology. It doesn't matter what they want to talk about with even the spring assisted, on the pump. So what they mean by that is, when you pull back on the pump, if you let it go, it will slide forward and
mm,
then you'll be able to fire again.
mm.
To me, I actually find that more of a, I guess, a hindrance, for a better term, than a normal pump action. I prefer, personally, a pump action that I can move forward with my hand and it locks into place. I fire, then it
Mm,
releases, and I can manipulate it again. With this, it's different. It goes forward and you fire, but then you've got to manually operate it
mm,
again.
mm,
But I actually find that a hindrance, because if you hold on to the wedge tail and you pull it back into your shoulder, if you're holding on to that pump, that fore end, well, what happens when you pull it back into your shoulder? You're
yeah,
pulling it out of battery, so it's
mm,
not going to fire.
mm,
So you've then got to move your hand back and put it into another position.
mm,
So that takes even longer over a traditional pump that locks forward.
mm,
So this business of, oh no, it's new technology and all the rest of it. No, it's not. There's
yeah,
nothing new about it. It is simply a pump action. If it was new technology, it would be required on a permit to acquire application to
mm.
put down a different action type. There's only one action type, and that's pump action for that particular firearm.
Now, a lot of people aren't aware that we actually have Australian firearms manufacturers. There's two that I know of: Southern Cross Arms and Wedgetail. There may be a few more. Apologies to any others that I've missed. But one of the
Mhm.
things that people react to is not so much who makes the gun or even how the gun operates, but largely just how it looks. A lot of people would look at this
Mhm.
picture on the screen right now and say, "Oh, scary black gun. That must be one of the ones that must be a fully automatic weapon of war."
Yeah, yeah, that's right. And this is what a lot of people don't realize, Topher, is we've had cosmetic appearance laws since 1996, when they wrote the legislation for the various states and territories under the definition of Category D firearm, or weapon as they're classed as here in Queensland, because it is the Weapons Act, because it encompasses, knives and other weapons.
Mm,
Um, it clearly says there that any firearm that substantially duplicates in function or appearance will be classed as a Category D firearm or weapon. So it just depends on how each state has enforced that
mm,
to the reality of it. And unfortunately, we see New South Wales, ACT, and obviously Tasmania enforcing that in relation to the wedge tail pump action rifle. But
mm,
then you think, okay, you can have a Remington 7600 in 308. You can still get a 10 round magazine for that.
mm,
Still fires exactly the same. and that's okay. So
Mm.
my argument with that is that just completely null and voids your argument for public safety,
Mm.
because you can't pick and choose just on the appearance. That's utterly ridiculous.
It is absurd. Now, but absurd kind of sums up Australia's firearm laws. I'll bring one example that I came across as I was researching for this particular segment. This is Wedgetail Industries once again. They actually manufacture suppressors, and a lot of Australians recoil at the thought of a suppressed firearm. They believe in the Hollywood version where it just makes a little pew pew. But I happen to be
Yeah.
aware from my own life experience, if you go shooting in the UK and you're not using a suppressor, it's considered extremely rude, and in some places you'll actually get into quite a lot of trouble for it. Why are we
Yeah.
such an outlier when it comes to this here in Australia?
I don't know, and I've questioned myself on that, because you look at our closest cousins, New Zealand, and
Mm,
even after we had the shooting over there and then their rehaul of their gun laws. I mean,
mm,
we even sent people from our own firearms registry over here to New Zealand to guide them on the new laws. Yet they're
mm,
still allowed to have semi-automatic rimfire rifles up to 10 rounds, semi-automatic and pump shotguns up to 5 rounds, plus suppressors still
mm,
freely available.
mm,
And you think to yourself, well, why? Why is this? I guess they're holding on so tightly here to the fact that if you have a suppressor, you turn into an assassin. And,
mm,
I blame Hollywood for that. But, very quickly, I'll explain this to, your viewers who may be thinking, well, okay, well, why do people need a suppressor? One, it reduces recoil. Two, it obviously reduces the noise. So when you look at it from a workplace health and safety point of view, I mean, especially
mm,
here in Queensland, no one has suppressors, even though workplace health and safety independent auditors will come out to like a farm, for example, and conduct a audit, and they will highly recommend it and say that, okay, you're lacking here, especially if you're sitting in like a harvester or a tractor and you're shooting as you're going through fields of wheat or whatever it may be that you're
mm,
farming.
mm,
The noise levels are dangerous.
mm,
And a suppressor, as you say, it doesn't make it just go cool, cool. Like the only way for it to really, really reduce the noise and be extremely effective is when you're using subsonic ammunition. So to me, if you're using subsonic ammunition out of, let's take hypothetically a very popular caliber like 223. So if you're using subsonic ammunition through that, what have you in effect done? You've turned it into a 22 LR, haven't you?
mm,
Because
mm.
it's going at subsonic velocity, so maybe about 1,000 feet a second. Pushing maybe a 40 to 55 grain pill at that speed. Well, what have you done? You've turned it into like a 22 LR or 22 Magnum. So
Yeah.
you're still going to hear. It's not completely silent. You're still going to hear that noise.
Mm,
But with the high velocity ammunition, where you have that supersonic clout, because it is just physics at the end of the day,
mm-hmm.
you still have that crack when it fires, but it takes a lot of the loud boom and everything away, so that that people who are, especially in an occupational environment,
Mm,
can lower that noise. But it's not just the occupational environment, in my view, that this should be applied. All the ranges. I mean, the SSAA Brisbane here
yeah.
for years have had continual complaints from housing estates that have gone in around the range.
Yeah.
Guys, we're willing to work with you. Why not allow
Yeah.
people at the range to have a suppressor, and then everyone's happy? We can have the shooters that still enjoy their sport and their
Mm,
hobby, but
mm,
we can have local residents that can enjoy a bit more peace and quiet,
mm.
because you don't have that loud boom that's going to just carry and carry and carry for distance. So yeah,
It's
there's so many practical applications for suppressors here. I cannot believe they're not legal.
It's the only technology that I'm aware of where the government has put in place regulations to make them loud. I'm not aware of that having happened in any other area of technology. One last quick anecdote. When I was in Texas some time ago, I was working on a film over there and we got to shoot a lot of guns. I got to shoot an AR-10, so that's chambered in 308,
Mhm.
and it was suppressed. And it was absolutely magnificent because once we went to that rifle, having been shooting 5.56 and other things with the big cans on and hearing protection, all of a sudden all of that could come off and it was still loud. It was like someone banged a drum near you. It wasn't
Yeah.
quiet, but it wasn't damaging to your hearing. And all of a
Mhm.
sudden, we could talk to each other. And if there was an issue and someone had to say stop, 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 which is your universal, you're on a range or anywhere else, if someone
Yeah.
sees a safety issue, they're going to yell stop, stop, stop. You could hear
Sure.
so much better and so much clearer because you didn't have to wear the massive cans because the weapon itself was made quieter. I think there are massive safety upsides to suppressors, and Australia is
Mhm.
genuinely one of the few countries in the world crazy enough to be banning them. Ozzie, is there a silver lining here? Is there light at the end of this tunnel, or are we staring into an abyss of ever more regulation in this area?
I think we're staring into an abyss, definitely, but it's not just firearms, mate. You've got to look very realistically at what's happening now. I mean, fishing is being restricted. Bow hunting is being
Mm,
restricted. They are coming for everything that you enjoy. And the only way to fight back that I say about this is fight back at the ballot box. We all have that freedom to be able to vote, and it is mandatory here in
mm,
Australia anyway.
mm.
So why not join together and vote as one? I mean, we've got over 1 million licensed shooters alone. I
Mm.
know a lot of them will be, 4-wheel drive and fishing enthusiasts
Yeah.
and so forth, but we've all got friends, family members that we can speak to. And then when it comes election time, get out there and do something. I mean, every election, I'm in a polling booth, handing out how to vote cards,
Mm,
whether it be for Liberal Democrats, Katter Party, One
mm,
Nation,
mm,
whoever at the time.
mm.
I'm happy to do that, and I'm happy to give up 4 hours or something like that of a
Every four
morning on
years.
election day,
Mm,
and mate, it means the world to the candidates,
mm.
and people go, oh well, they didn't get voted in anyway, did they? But well, what, should I just stay at home and just give up?
That's
This
right.
is the thing: if we all get involved in this, so when any restriction is proposed, our local members, both state and federal, are flooded with
Mm,
emails. They come in on Monday morning and they open their email box, and there's 1,000 odd emails there saying,
mm,
if you support this, I will not vote for you.
mm,
That sends an insanely powerful message. But shooters, instead of that, they'll spend the same amount of time, if not more, whinging online about how they've lost more or blaming everyone
mm,
else and doing
mm,
absolutely nothing themselves. So it's just so disappointing and frustrating because, mate, we have the numbers. We
mm,
actually have the numbers, in my view, to shape all future elections at every level.
mm,
All we've got to do is just come together.
mm. Well, that's so true, though, in so many different areas. Well, Ozzy, thank you so much for your time with this interview. All the best with your ongoing. I love your work, by the way. I'm a bit of a fan of your channel,
Thank you,
Aussie
mate.
Reviews. We'll put the link in the description. But also, I think I can only hope that we see some more sanity when it comes to firearms legislation in this country at some point in my lifetime. But then again, we'll have to wait and see. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, mate. Appreciate it.